Charles.
He raises a beautiful, amazing point. There's no place in the world that a black person would want to live. If you were dropped here from outer space and you could pick a country, you would pick America 100 times out of 100 options. I do want to go over a few things, though, that were said. Irreparably set back. I disagree with that. Listen, there are legacies of slavery. There's legacy of racism, which still exists, although not nearly as where it was in the past. Reparations. I got to tell you something. The notion of sending out checks, let's just say you sent someone $100,000. You would actually be doing most people, I don't care what color they are in this country, a disservice. If I send everybody in this country $100,000 today, I would say 70% of them would not only be broke a year from now, they would be in debt. Many would be in debt for $100,000. That's not a solution for either side. If you really want to clean this up, and the term white supremacy keeps coming up because I think that's the biggest misnomer in the world. When the media says 3 white guys in a pickup truck with a Confederate flag, are white supremacists, I think this notion of white supremacy exists in the elite that Jon Stewart happens to be a part of. That's who are the white supremacists, and they don't just look down on blacks, Hispanics, they look down on other whites. And as long as they can keep us at odds with each other, as long as they can keep the status quo, us versus them, they will stay in their elite palaces and continue to rule. And I think we all need to wake up to that.
I wholeheartedly agree. And Tammy, what I see from Jon Stewart as well is this performative activism, because to Charles's point, he's certainly not done anything to change the comforts of his life. Perhaps his show aptly named The Problem with Jon Stewart.
Yes, exactly. And I have to say that, the 5 of us here, we're exactly the kind of people that aren't supposed to be able to have a conversation, that aren't supposed to know each other, that are supposed to be suspicious of each other. That's what is the threat, right, is when you see larger conversations with people who are different. And that's the beauty of the country. Harris, as you point out quite often, the nature of freedom of thought, the diversity of who we are as individuals. But I have to say, his delivery was interesting to me, that it was uncomfortable. It was stilted. Yeah. It was as though that this is, again, coming from some other space that he feels or has been asked to deliver. And, of course, Sullivan is fabulous in this regard as well, in blowing that apart, because Americans can see through this, but they sure seem determined to keep us divided, don't they?
They do.
So that tone is so important, though, because it is the reduction of who we are as diverse peoples, right? It is that sort of, he knows best for everybody. On a high horse, just climb down from the tower, from the castle, and he's going to disseminate among, all the groups of people what's best for all of us. It is, and you're right, Tammy, it is so, his voice is so affected. He stumbles on the word. I couldn't figure out if he meant it reparation or repair. I didn't know if he was joking. If he was, he's not as funny as he used to be. But he didn't listen to Andrew Sullivan. And that, to me, is the biggest problem. And it speaks to what we talked about with Disney. That we're not having a real conversation about the things that matter. We're not listening to each other. You could tell he was not listening. He wasn't paying attention because, oh, well, then I have a question for you at the end there, Andrew. Like, react to Andrew. You can't disagree with him. 86% of the people immigrating are people of color. Why do you think they're coming here? Right. I mean, that's a statistic that poor Jon Stewart couldn't get. I guess that's the problem with Jon Stewart.
And I really appreciate your point, too, about that they're coming from this elitist place, and it's so rigid. It's unable to view different viewpoints or appreciate them. Remember, our president said, well, if you don't vote for him, then you aren't a certain skin color. That's a trickle-down effect that all of them seem to have. If you are in a box that they put you in, you must act, you must vote, you must feel a certain way, and if you don't, then you are shunned.
Totally, and you hit the nail on the head. Look, it's one thing when you hear about this systemic racism from a has-been comedian. It's another thing when you hear about systemic racism being weaponized by leaders like Mayorkas. Do you remember that border whip story that we talk so much about? Do you remember he said it conjured up the worst images of systemic racism? Then you had Ilhan Omar come out and say this is systemic racism. What happened to that story? These guys were cleared of charges. It was a made-up, conjured-up story to play into a narrative. So it's one thing from Jon Stewart. It's another thing when it's from our leaders.
And now it's all collaborated together.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.